Hey YouTube, Kira Twig here, bringing you all my Legendary Knight Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for September 2020. Wanted to finally bring the long-awaited Legendary Knight deck profile to you all. This is probably my most requested deck that I've seen on my channel to date. I wanted to wait until the Dragons of Legend completed series to do this deck profile, just because it would have been a lot easier for people to gather up the cards, needing all the different Legendary Knight support, the Legendary Dragons support, you name it, to make this deck. And it's a really interesting deck, focusing on the playstyle of summoning out all three of the Legendary Knights, and then going for your fusion monster that revolves around having the different Legendary Dragon cards for that additional setup in the graveyard. Definitely, like I said, an interesting playstyle. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. Now we have a relatively low monster count in the deck. As for the Legendary Knight monsters, I run one Legendary Knight of Timaeus, one Legendary Knight of Critias, and one Legendary Knight of Hermos. Sadly, I wasn't able to pull one of the yellow ultra rare Hermos from the booster set like I was with Timaeus and Critias, but still, all the cards do the same effect, with them all sharing, and they cannot be normal summoned or set. They must be special summoned with Legend of Heart. When this card is special summoned, you can target one face-up spell or trap on the field and banish that card, all having that same effect, and then each differing, with Timaeus having, when this card is targeted for an attack, you can target one spell in your graveyard and set that target. With Critias, when it is targeted for an attack, you can target one trap in your graveyard and set that target. It can be activated this turn, so a very interesting difference with Critias as well. And with Hermos, once per turn, when this card is targeted for an attack, you can target one effect monster in your graveyard until the end phase of your next turn. This card's name becomes that target's original name, and replace this card's effect with that monster's original effect. So they all have beneficial effects when they're targeted for attacks. Being able to take care of the face-up spell or traps on the field can go great against a bunch of different decks, depending on what you're playing against. But the easy special summon just gives you setup for a bunch of different extra deck plays as well, since they're all level 8 monsters. So Exceed summons, easy link summons, you name it, you have this option. But the main play you want to go for with this card is to summon out Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny, your main go-to fusion, which then you can rely on to attack over a good number of different monsters your opponent may have on the field, and then summon them all back when it leaves the field as well. But you really, like I said, only need one copy of each of these cards in the deck, because you summon them out with Legend of Heart, which summons them from the hand, deck, or graveyard. So as long as your opponent doesn't take care of any of these cards with any of their cards, you'll be able to easily get them out onto the field. For the additional monster support, I also run 3 Raiden, Hand of Lightsworn, a very useful card in the deck just for the overall setup of your graveyard, with plenty of the different Legendary Dragon cards, which we'll go over when we get to the spells for Legend of Heart. With Raiden, during your main phase, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. If any Lightsworns were sent to the graveyard with this effect, this card gains 200 attack, and then at the end of the turn, you send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard. So 4 cards in total can be sent with Raiden, Hand of the Lightsworn, and it is also a warrior monster, which you need for Legend of Heart, making it that much more easier to set up for your playstyle you want to go for, and getting more and more of the Legendary Dragon cards in the graveyard for your setup. So like I said, it's your number 1 warrior to use in the deck, so you definitely want to run 3 of it for sure. And for more graveyard setup, I am also running 3 Curry Bandit. This card just came out in the Battles, I was about to say Battles of Legend, Dragons of Legend completed series, so another easy card to get a hold of for this deck. During the end phase, if this card was normal summon this turn, you contribute this card, excavate the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can add 1 excavated spell or trap to your hand and send the remaining cards to the graveyard. So if you excavate a bunch of different spells, but let's say Legend of Heart is among them, you can add that one to your hand, send the remaining cards, which could be the Legendary Dragon cards, to the graveyard, and have that easy setup for next turn as well, using Curry Bandit for that setup. So having 3 of this just helps for another additional normal summon option for that play, setting up any of the needed cards you may have in your graveyard to use. And checking top 5 along with Raiden for the setup next turn makes it all the better to have all those cards in your graveyard ready to use. For another warrior monster spot, I also run 3 junk forward. Now, this is just an easy special summon to have a warrior monster on the field. If you didn't want to run junk forward and just want to have more search power, let's say, for Raiden, which can help to set up the graveyard some more, you can take out the junk forwards and then put in a charge of the Light Brigade playset, just being more search power to get Raiden out onto the field, and then also have more cards sent to the graveyard, setting up the legendary dragons in the graveyard that much faster. That's player preference at that point. If you have the junk forwards and the Raidens, you can use both of those, but if you have the charge of Light Brigades and you just want to use them with the Raidens, you can do that play as well. And then to finish off the monsters, I just run the 3 Ash Blossom, just a good hand trap option against your opponent. You can even run Effect Veiler or Ghost Ogre, whatever you want in this spot. Nibiru, you name it, if you want to take care of the big plays. This can just be the hand trap option spot in the deck for you to use. But my preference for this deck was Ash Blossom, but I know a lot of people have different choices they want for the deck, but this is just that spot for the hand traps that you may want. And that is it for the monsters. Like I said, we do run a small monster count, but our main go-to plays are the warrior monsters and also just setting up all the spells in our graveyard to get the 3 legendary knights out on the field. So with that, moving on now to the spells. Our main go-to spell in the deck is Legend of Heart. You pay 2,000 life points and tribute 1 warrior monster. Banish up to 3 legendary dragon spells with different names from your hand and or graveyard. If you do special summon that many legendary knight monsters with different names from your hand, deck, and or graveyard, you can activate 1 Legend of Heart per turn. It's your main go-to card to summon out your 3 legendary knights from the deck to the field. So being able to rely on Legend of Heart for this play just sets up all your different plays, including your Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny play, and just giving you resources for all of your different extra deck plays you may want to go for. For just 2,000 life points, you don't really use life points for anything else in the deck, so having these options available to you with Legend of Heart makes it a definite 3 of, because you do want to open it up, and even if it gets sent to the graveyard, we have other cards to recycle it back into your hand for you to use also. But it's your most important card in the deck, so you want to have just a quick way to get it back into your hand to use as well. For the legendary dragon support, I am running 2 Eye of Timaeus and 2 Fang of Critias and also 2 Claw of Hermos, just because the banish for Legend of Heart means that we won't be able to see the cards again for the special summon of this card. But just an easy way, let's say your opponent somehow gets around Knight of Timaeus and you want the option to get a second one out onto the field, being able to rely on having more copies of this to use with Legend of Heart, which will then special summon the cards from the graveyard as well, even if you've already used them once in the duel already. Having more options to send, and also just backup options as well, because you have the warrior monsters to use for Hermos, and I also added a few trap options to use with Fang of Critias to actually get out the different fusion monsters that we run in the extra deck along with this card. The only card I couldn't really find a spot for was the Eye of Timaeus. I still like to run the 2 of in the deck, so we have the added option like I spoke of before. But with it, it's just that card that kind of does nothing in the hand, but you want to set it up more in the graveyard as well, regardless, and can be the cost for some of the other cards we run in the deck altogether. That's why I'm running 2 copies and a better chance with cards like Raiden and Curry Bandit just to send more copies of these cards to the graveyard also. And then for more setup, if you're just 1 legendary dragon off in the graveyard, I run the 3 Foolish Burial. Let's say you have Hermos and Critias in the graveyard, but you just need that 1 Timaeus from the deck set. Then you're all set up for your Legend of Heart play with these 3 cards all set up in the graveyard. So 3 Foolish Burial goods is definitely needed for that playstyle in the graveyard to go for. And then just better chance that you won't draw those cards into your hand as well. But let's say the Legend of Heart is in the graveyard, but you have plenty of hand material. I run 3 Magical Stone Excavation. You discard 2 cards, then target 1 spell in your graveyard, add to your hand. So let's say with Curry Bandit, you send Legend of Heart and plenty of other cards to the graveyard with the Excavation. You could potentially add the Legend of Heart to your hand, but if it gets milled with cards like Raiden in the graveyard with all the other ones, and you have the cost in your hand to use with Magical Stone Excavation, you can discard the other cards, which could also be potentially, legendary dragons you open up in your hand to the graveyard, and add the Legend of Heart back into your hand. And then all you'll need is the warrior monster on the field. Magical Stone Excavation is just a good recycle power as well. I've seen some versions of the deck use trade-in if you wanted to just rely on the chance that you'll have the, legendary knights in your hand. For the discard cost for trade-in for draw power, you can use that as well. This card is basically my choice for the spell lineup. When playing the deck, I found consistency more with the different spells in my hand and needing more spells in the graveyard than opening up the legendary knights in my hand and discarding them for cost for trade-in. That's why I prefer Magical Stone Excavation, because then I have other, dud cards in my hand, which I can, would rather have in the graveyard for the setup and then have the most important spell in the deck back into my hand to use. Even if I don't open up the multiples and I can go for this play a second time, being able to use Magical Stone Excavation for that recycle is definitely needed. For more of the one-ofs for the spells I run in the deck, I run 1 Reasoning. This is just more setup in the graveyard. I can potentially get a monster I want. If not, it'll just go to the graveyard for the cost, since it won't be able to be special summoned normally. I also run 1 Foolish Burial, more setup so I don't open up any of the cards with the draw in my hand. 1 Monster Reborn, if my opponent, like say, I, use the Karibo normal summon, but I have Raiden in my graveyard ready to go, I can summon Raiden and then set up the Karibo while still having my normal summon taken up by that card, and then summon Raiden off of the Monster Reborn to use for the mill as well. And 1 Reinforcements of the Army, just search out the warrior monster I need for Legend of Heart. Pretty self-explanatory with that one of choice in the deck. And then lastly, to finish off these spells, I just run the 3 Call by the Grave. The biggest thing that can hurt this deck is the hand trap option that my opponent will use against me. So 3 Call by the Grave definitely needed to stop that play, and then just giving me the option to go through with the main play of my deck altogether. And that is it for the spells. For the traps, I run 1 Ring of Destruction, 1 Crush Card Virus, and 1 Mirror Force. All options for Fang of Critias, and also with Legendary Knight Critias as well. If you set up this card on the field and you have your traps in the graveyard when your opponent attacks, you can set one of these traps potentially on the field. My preferred choices being Mirror Force and Ring of Destruction, more easier to use, obviously. Then you can activate these cards the turn they're set, giving you more defensive plays against your opponent if they were to attack into your legendary knights. And also just the options to use these cards if you open them up with legendary dragon Critias as well. And there are other options to just send to the graveyard if you have your legendary dragons already set up in the graveyard with Foolish Burial goods as well. And that is it for the main deck. We will now move on to the extra deck. Your main go-to fusion is Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny, with this card, and your main go-to play with the newly reprinted card in the latest set. It must be special summoned from your extra deck by sending the above cards you control to the graveyard. You do not use polymerization. It's unaffected by other card effects, and once per battle, if this card battles during damage calculation, quick effect, you can make this card's attack and defense become equal to the attack of the monster on the field with the highest attack from your choice of the card. And when this card is destroyed by battle, you can special summon 3 legendary knight monsters from your hand, deck, and or graveyard, ignoring their summoning condition. So giving you the option to summon the knights back onto the field as well is why we are running 3 of this card, because then once you, let's say your Knight of Destiny is destroyed, you'll get all 3 of the knights back on the field for you to use, and not needing polymerization. Coming again next turn, you can summon another Knight of Destiny onto the field, and if your opponent somehow gets over the second copy and you special summon all 3 of the knights back onto the field as well, you have the third option to summon out and using these 3 cards for it. If your opponent stops the summon and then they're sent back into the graveyard, it's the reason why we have the option for the second of copies of all the legendary dragons to use with our Legend of Heart, so we can redo the play over again if we need to properly summon out these 3 cards once again to summon out Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny. And also for the rest of the extra deck, I run 1 Goddess Bow. You summon this card using a warrior monster and Claw of Hermos. So with Raiden and Junk Forward, it's an easy option to summon out. Also 1 Rocket Hermos Cannon, same, using a warrior monster. Just good fusion monsters to have as options with your legendary dragon cards in the deck. And also I run 1 Red Eyes Black Dragon Sword. You have to use a dragon monster, which we don't run in the main deck, but we do have some link monster options being dragon monsters. If you make these, then you have the option option with your Claw of Hermos to summon this card out also. And I also run the 1 Destruction Dragon, 1 Mirror Force Dragon, and 1 Doom Virus Dragon for all the Fang of Critias plays we have in the deck. Also, like I said, I didn't have any spots for Dark Magician Girl or Dark Magician to fit in the actual deck for the play styles. That's why if you wanted to try it out, you can maybe remove some or, the Crush card, Virus, or Ring of Destruction play and add in that, but then it takes away from the Critias play. If you can find a spot for it and to summon it out, you can give it a try, even just tribute summoning out, but then, like I said, it takes away from the main point of the deck, which are the legendary Night Monsters. For the Xyz plays, since they are level 8s, I run 1 number 38, 1 Dingirsu, and 1 number 107 being another Dragon Monster for the Hermos fusion options, but just other Xyz monsters if you need to go with these options for the extra deck. And for the Link monsters, I run 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 Triple Burst Dragon, and 1 Borolo Dragon, preferring the Dragon options, but also back row destruction with this card if my opponent were to try and use a counter trap to stop my Legendary Knights play. And as we spoke of before, your main go-to setup with this deck is just using your different cards for the graveyard setup for Legend of Hearts. So whether you open up your Raiden or your Curry Bandit, and then let's say you just have to play the mill option, sending your different legendary dragons to the graveyard to then set up your Legend of Heart. And as long as you have Raiden on the field or even another warrior monster, you summon out to the field to tribute for your Legend of Heart, banishing the 3 spells and tributing the 1 warrior monster you have on the field to summon the 3 legendary knights from your deck, graveyard, or hand onto the field to use, and then going for your main fusion play, which once you get these 3 cards out on the field, then being able to summon out Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny, you have the option to go into all the copies, which we already spoke of in the deck, and then continue the steps over and over again, or go into the Xyz plays, using some of the other knights on the field, more than likely keeping your preferred knight on the field if you have the setup you want in your graveyard, for whichever one you want to keep on the field also, or even just going for the Link option. With all 3, you have plenty of choices to summon out these cards and go for those play styles in the deck. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed. Like I said, a lot of people have been waiting for this deck profile, and I'm finally glad I got it finished and out to you all. It was definitely fun making it as well. Just the play style altogether is an interesting one for sure, and definitely, if you're wanting to replay all of your different Waking the Dragon decks and play styles, this is the way to go for sure. I might even consider an Orichalcos Shunros deck later in the future, revolving around that card, and maybe we'll even see more Orichalcos support in the future at some point. But until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.